Ann Thompson-Frenk. Will you join us, please?
Thank you. God, I can take this off. I'm 4'11", so I never stand behind these things. I really am absolutely honored today, and I'm really grateful for all those of you that are running for office to be here, because Don asked me in particular to not necessarily to speak to the general public, but to speak to those of you that are aspiring for leadership. And so I'm going to cut to the chase. I'm not going to be politically correct, but I'm going to share with you, based on some of the things I've been seeing, what we're dealing with. Right now, we are fighting for the soul of our nation. Let me say that again. We are fighting for the soul of our nation. Yeah. Now, what do you want that dream to be? Thomas Jefferson, if you've ever gone to the memorial and you're a nerd like me and you actually read all the words on the wall, one of the things he says in that wonderful place, and actually I find it kind of spiritual, I'm standing there thinking, looking at what happened, he actually has on the wall that his greatest hope is that one day the descendants of the Founding Fathers, and that's all of us in this room and all of us watching online, every single one of you, his greatest hope is that we would consider them antiquated. Now think about what that means. He was a slave-owning man. He had an amazing vision. He knew he was doing some things wrong. He knew what this nation could be, and he wanted to one day be considered antiquated, and he was one of the most forward thinkers of his time. What that suggests is that the United States of America is a social experiment that we are all privileged to be a part of. Now, I'm going to share a few things with you that you may not know. In Dallas County, actually city of Dallas, not Dallas County, there are 450 Native American languages spoken alone, and that's not even the Mexican Hispanic ones. That's not Zapoteca, that's not Azteca, that's not all Mayas. It's actually just people from within the United States borders. 450 Native American languages spoken alone in the city. If you go and you actually want to do your time on serving jury duty, guess what demographic is never listed? They're other. They're unseen. So I want to make a nod to the Native Americans out there. We have one of the third largest communities of them in Dallas, and if you go into DFW, it's huge, urban communities in the nation. When you're out there speaking, please consider them. If you're actually going to a powwow, you're going to see people that look black, that look Asian, that look white, and guess what? One of the main languages they speak is an indigenous language. If you talk to a Hispanic person, you're often going to end up finding someone that, yes, they're Mexican or they're Peruvian, and be respectful and say, what tribe are you from? They light up because they are Native American. So we need to start looking at things a little past. But that's just one little thing that I want to talk about. The other things I want to talk about is exactly where our nation is. Now, recently, I've been working on a book with a very amazing man named Dr. Irvin Laszlo, who's been nominated 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize. And in the process of doing this book, Irvin is 90 years old, so I've been going and getting the preliminary interviews and filming them so that he can view them and we can write this book together. And in the process, there are 2 people that I literally just came back, and you are the first people publicly that I've talked to about the content of that. One was with Dr. James Doty. He's head of Stanford University's neurology department, and he's actually been able to show evidence, scientifically peer-reviewed, this is all proven, that if you live a compassionate life, your brain, your whole neurological system, and all the organs in your body are healthier. So if you're talking to a sociopath, it's in their best interest to act compassionately, even if they're not feeling it, because it's better for their heart and all their lungs and their liver and their brain and their spinal cord. Now, here's the other thing that's scary that he told me, that when you are in a state of survival, you are physiologically unable to feel empathy. Now, really think what that means. In the past, survival meant, oh, there's a lion chasing me, and you'd feel it. You didn't have time to think about anything else. You had to get out of the way. So you're designed biologically not to think about anything else except getting away from the lion. But today, you have the same neurological reactions when somebody says, they're stealing your job. When somebody says, it's their fault. Now, we all know, those of us that are in leadership positions, that it's the laziest, easy way to get somebody to cheer for you. It's say, I stand for this, and it's their fault, because it requires no action, no commitment, no building, no finding a solution. And that's the easiest way. You get on Instagram. And yet, another gentleman that I met with, his name is Azer Raskin. He's head of AI for the Economic World Forum. He explained to me, TikTok, for example, is owned by China's version of the CIA and is designed intentionally through its algorithms to sow dissent. So it can tell by what people do. If you happen to be anorexic, it starts bombarding you with images that talk about the perfect figure, what you need to diet. If you are, and this is where it comes to you, everyone in this room, if you are struggling economically, the algorithm is designed to bombard you with hate groups. TikTok is one of the #1 leading social media platforms in the nation. So I just want to paint this picture. This is what we're up against. We are up against a very streamlined, scientifically proven, strategic enemy. And the enemy, that's the other thing I want to address. It's not just somebody that thinks different than you. The enemy are those that see profit in the whole process. I'm actually not that worried, and this will sound strange, especially here in white settlement, but I'm actually not that worried about the true bigot, because I can sit with somebody, and I've sat with white supremacists, and I've said, without sounding sarcastic, and that's key, can you tell me how they're helping you? Is there a Ku Klux Klan small business fund? Is there a skinhead scholarship fund? Okay, well then tell me what they've actually done to improve your life. Or are you just forking up dues? Oh, and then the next thing I say, as someone with melanin in my skin, well, tell me how I can help you. And then you see their face change, and suddenly they're going, this person's actually concerned. And your actions speak louder than words. Here around Fort Worth, a number of years ago, when the media was saying to everybody, hate Muslims, hate Muslims. My organization, the Machinists Institute, we had an interface service network of people from all over the DFW Metroplex, every demographic you can think of. And one day, we ended up having a bunch of Muslims that signed up to go and repair the roof of a tiny church in this area that was falling in. And what we ended up finding is the people that were the congregation of that church, they came back and they said, I've been told by people all over, hate these people, Fox News, hate these people. And I end up telling them, they just fixed the roof of my church. That is how we heal our nation. But if we fall into the slippery slope of doing the blame game, we tear it apart. And that's the challenge I want to give to all of the candidates here today. Because right now, I'm asking you to think beyond trying to aspire to be in the leadership position or maintain your leadership position, whichever it is, which requires, I know, you need the soundbite. People have such a short attention span. You want to say the big thing that can get you in front of people. But the concern is that sometimes the big thing that gets you in front of people and all over the news is a knife that cuts something that cannot be healed easily. Now, as a humanitarian, a lot of my work has been helping to repair that work in our backyard between different racial demographics, LGBT, women, men, different religions. And let me tell you, it is a lot of hard work. We have one amazing person on our staff at the Machinists Institute, Reverend Dr. Todd Collier, and he is a Republican. He's white, he has a strong Oklahoma accent, and he spent almost 10 years going into a community outside of Dallas to convince them that a Muslim cemetery would not be a threat. Now, really think about that. You're having to convince people that dead people are not a threat. And it all began because a simple imam wanted to bury his 8-year-old daughter and was turned away from every Christian graveyard. So he just wanted to bury his daughter. He had to store her somewhere until they could get a cemetery after a 10-year process. Now, this is our backyard. And when I say our, I want to say the DFW, I want to say Texas, and I want to say the United States. Now, I have friends. There's a friend whose name I won't say that I've known since I was in kindergarten. And we were such close friends. But on January 6th, I got a phone call from him. And he said, if you continue to have friends and talk to friends and family in the Republican side, I don't want to be in your life. I won't lie to you, I cried. I cried buckets, because this was a close friend. But meanwhile, we had the Food Source DFW program, which feeds about 5,000 families a day in Dallas alone, and now goes all over the nation and helping different communities. But in that process, And it's because the people in the Zoom, I should mention to you, it used to feed just about 2,500 a week, and under Trump it ended up being 5,000 a day. So think about the difference in numbers there. But anyway, in that process, we don't say, if someone says, I have a huge truck of melons for you, bananas, bread, we don't ever stop and say, well, what political party are you from? Your bread's not good enough. No, I'm going to say thank you very much and bring it to people, and I'm not going to ask those who are hungry what political party they are. I'm going to get it to them. Because at the end of the day, they are human beings, and I'm grateful for the human beings that are giving something, and I'm grateful for those that are able to come out there and help their families. And if you're in a situation where someone is actually advocating that I turn away a donation from hungry people, that is a sickness in our country. We can't function that way. And that's why, as someone that's out there in the trenches working with people and trying to repair some of the dissent in our country, I'm asking all of you that are running for office to really think of yourself, not just as leaders, but as people responsible for maintaining the soul of our nation. What you do, what you say, how you act will all change the direction that we have to go. I have no doubt that 100 years from now, and I'm saying this as someone who has projects around the world, to work with some of the top leading people in every area you can think of. I have no doubt that 100 years from now, people will look back at this moment in time, and they will say, thank God for them, that's why we still have a United States of America that's inclusive, that's being able to grow and evolve. Or they will point back to everybody in this room and everybody watching that's alive in this time and say, it's their fault that we live in a hellhole. But that is the moment in time we have. And as I say, with every speech that I have, right now, every one of you has a cell phone, has access to more people, more information than kings and queens and prime ministers had for centuries. You have so much power. And what you say resonates further and deeper than you can begin to imagine. Now, one of the things I'm concerned about is there are two things. They seem like they're going in opposite directions, but the reality is that they coexist. It's very easy for us to say someone that we disagree with is a fascist or a Nazi. Now, when we start saying that, we end up tearing our families apart and our city apart. I have elders in my family that are in their 80s that have been Republican for a long time, and they came to me and they said, Mary Ann, I haven't changed a thing about what I believe. I believe in science, and I'm a Christian. I don't see them as a conflict. I joined this because I'm worried about being fiscally conservative, but I'm now being told if I don't hate LGBT people or brown people or black people, that I'm a rhino. I have no place to go. I'm now being told that if I advocate for wearing a mask during a pandemic, or I happen to believe in science, or I want to go get vaccinated, that I'm a rhino. They feel completely isolated. And that is a demographic that if you're serious about wanting to get ahead and try and take some political control in this country, you have to appeal to. When we try and isolate, make ourselves look better and say, I am pure, no one's pure. No, everyone's messed up. Everyone's offended somebody. Everybody's made a mistake we cringe about when we look at our past. But if we're not willing to embrace some of our brothers and sisters that don't like what they're hearing on the other side, then our nation is going to fall. Now, when I start talking about this, I want to identify them as one demographic, and the other demographic I want to talk about is the one that we need to be concerned about. I don't know how many of you know about history in this room, but in the 1800s, up in Seattle, there were a group of businessmen that wanted to make sure that the unions would never get a foothold. And one of the first things they did is they said, you know what, we're never going to get the larger population who's struggling economically to agree with us. So what we need to do is we need to get basically a religious fundamentalism and marry the two. This is in the mid-1800s. That movement grew, skipping a lot of history. It gave rise to the Ku Klux Klan political party in America, where we get Make America Great Again, the slogan came from. Many of you probably know the history that a lot of times when Trump launched a particular speech or something, it was on the anniversary of one of the things that made a lot of, that meant a lot to people there. So these were little nuances that were consistently sent out to say, I'm carrying that flag. So the extremism was in the beginning of this and continued. It went on into World War II. World War II suddenly was unpopular to be aligned with it. They got quiet. A lot of it continued. I don't know, many of you fly into DFW and have noticed that big building that's a replica of the White House. You can go online, you can find it. The same groups eventually, they literally put a crown on Ted Cruz's head, and they had a number of spiritual leaders that put the crown on his head and truly believe he's going to rule during the end times. A lot of these same people became Trump's main spiritual advisors. They never saw Trump come in and hijack what they had spent over a century building. But that's important to know, because you have people that spent money and time and strategized for a leader, and then someone else took it over. So when it seemed like he came out of nowhere, it didn't come out of nowhere. It was over 100 years of building, and then someone hijacked the platform. The reason why all this is important is because there are two groups that I'm very concerned about. There are those that truly are advocating for a theocracy instead of a democracy. But their theocracy is also something to worry about, because there's a tiny little thing. If any of you know your theology much, they talk about caring for the poor. They changed to say caring for the poor in spirit. That tiny little thing allows you to work with anybody. You could work with Jeffrey Dahmer, you could work with any horrendous person and be able to justify it. And that is what allowed Steve Bannon to go over to Hungary and to create the Make Families Great Again campaign, which was funded under the Trump administration. And it resulted in rolling the women's rights in Hungary back to the 1960s. All this is public. They made a public statement that their goal is to now replicate the process in the United States of America. The keynote speaker for all that, when they also established a CPAC for Hungary, was Trump. So it shouldn't have been a surprise that Victor Orban decided to come over here and repay the favor fairly recently. Now, this is where I'm concerned. I called out to a lot of friends, Republican, Democrat. I said, I want you to stand with me. I made a poster that said, both Republicans, Democrats stand against the idea of racial purity, stand against making interracial marriage illegal, stand against saying that we should legally be able to take the lunch money from gay children or the children of gay parents. These are actual things that they were advocating for, openly.
You gonna wrap it up?
Yes, I will. But when we were standing there, I honestly could not get a single Democrat politician to stand with me, nor could I get a statement. And that worries me. If you truly care about the United States of America and what we were intended to do, we have to do two things that seem contrasting, but in reality coexist. One, there is a rise in fascism and a desire to make it a theocracy by very strategic individuals. That is one group. On the other hand, we have people that are our brothers and our sisters that are being wooed by the far right, that simply care about the everyday stuff, and they are out there trying to survive. So if you're out there trying to appeal to the Hispanic vote or the black vote, you can't go in there and say, stand with me on this high ideal. You have to go in, where are they thinking? Even the extremists who are in the white communities, what are they thinking? They're saying, help me survive. You cannot make it so that you're trying to appeal to them from idealism. You have to say, what is helping you survive? Because we cannot appeal and say, abortion on one side. You don't win them over. That's a huge issue for them. Instead, that's one thing. What's the scale? The other side of the scale are survival of being able to pay their mortgage, be able to pay their education, all those things. Find more things on the side that helps them survive. And that's how you get past the neurological existence in their brains that will not allow them to have empathy for others because they're in survival mode. So please, as you go out there, if you care about redirecting our nation, understand how the human mind works, understand the history, and strategize that way. Thank you.